Every pre-season, there are players that start to emerge as good early targets for us in the Premier League campaign. So I've been keeping an eye on some surprise FPL assets that are ready to explode. And I'm going to start with someone who is very well known to all of us, but is definitely flying under the radar in these early weeks of preparation. And that man is Gabriel Jesus. Now, he's definitely become the forgotten man of the Arsenal attack. And that's because we've been looking at every other asset in that front lineup. Now, Havertz is the only other actual forward that we've been looking at, and he's 14% owned. But the other attackers who are listed as midfielders would be down as Saka, who's 26% owned, Odegaard is about 17%, even Martinelli's 4%. Gabriel Jesus is currently 1% owned, and that's why we need to pay close attention to his situation in this Arsenal lineup at the moment, because even the 1%, they're probably all on auto pick. Nobody's actually picking Gabriel Jesus at the moment. He's 7 million in this game, but after the Man United friendly in which he scored, Mikel Arteta spoke about him and said he had the spark back in his eyes. When a manager says that, I'm always going to pay close attention. Last season was a pretty bad one for Gabriel Jesus. Scored only 4 times by 27 games. Obviously lost his place in the attack, a role that we thought he was going to hold. He lost it to Havertz and obviously struggled with injuries as well. So it was difficult to trust Jesus, and I understand people who will still have some trust issues, but he's starting to bang again, and I'm not willing to totally ignore him going into the new season, because the way he's looking, the way that Arsenal are talking about him, seems like it might be Gabriel Jesus' season once again. Now, Arsenal need to utilise their depth this season, and if they are as free scoring as they were last season, then he might well emerge as somebody that we want, because even on a rotation, he could be among the goals. There was a really interesting quote from Mikel Arteta at the weekend. I'm just going to read it out because I think it's everything you need to know about where Gabriel Jesus is right now in his thinking and his own preparations. Arteta said he looks really good, he looks really sharp, and he's changed a lot of things over the summer. He's come in top condition again, and the way he looks, his rhythm, his sharpness, the way he's moving is good. He says he now has a point to prove, and that is good. I like that. I like players who have got a point to prove. And Gabriel Jesus, I've got eyes on you going into the new season. Now, the favourites to win the league this season, of course, are Man City. Getting into the Man City side is extremely difficult. We all know that, and automatically you start to look at Haaland and De Bruyne, maybe Doku, maybe Grealish, but probably the likes of Foden as well. There's a youngster in pre-season doing his best to prove that he deserves a chance and should also be in the back of our mind, and that's Oscar Bob. Now, didn't expect to be doing a video about Oscar Bob at this stage, but here we are. The 21-year-old Norwegian is so exciting. His footwork's unreal. He's so tricky. He's unpredictable. And if he starts getting game time, he is exactly the type of player we all want to pad out our squad with. Now, the real intrigue will come in terms of understanding how Man City actually keep this player happy, because this guy needs minutes. There's no doubt about it. There are other teams starting to wonder if he might be available on loan. So far, that's not the case, but he is so good. I'm actually putting him in that Cole Palmer bracket, and I think City kind of are too. And he's that good. They're probably scared of losing him, and he goes and bangs somewhere else like Cole Palmer has done. So at the moment, like, let's be honest, it's tricky to go to him because he's 5 million and we don't know he's going to get game time. But in pre-season, he's been good. Some of his play against AC Milan was mesmerising, and we all know about him. He's had time to feel his way into this environment. This really feels like his proper breakout year to me. I'm going to keep an eye on the rest of his pre-season, because if it goes well, I'm tempted to pick him. Right, over at Man United, there is space for an emerging star as well. There's a lad that's trying to make a role for himself, and the signs are good. His name is Ahmed Diallo. Yeah, Ahmed Diallo. I'm actually at that point right now. Look, he's getting a chance in this Man United team at the moment while they're on their US tour, and he looks really hungry to take it. The issue for Diallo is showing consistency. In flashes, we see an absolute top-notch player. But in FPL, we got trust issues, and I get that. Playing on that right side of the United attack, though, is going to get chances 4 minutes, and the club have so far shown no signs of letting him leave if anyone's inquired about his availability. Now, look, I'm still slightly hesitant over properly recommending this player because I fear he could still be flaky. But if he is in the plans for Ten Hag, then at 5 million, there's part of me that would be tempted to take a gamble on him in the early game weeks. They've got games like Fulham and Southampton, Palace, and they look like good opportunities to me for Diallo to actually build a platform for his season. I speak to a few people around Man United, and the general message around Diallo is that this is it. This is the defining season for him. If it doesn't work now, it's never going to work. It's time to turn up. He seems like he knows that, and he has good goal involvement so far. Whenever he's involved, he's having a decent pre-season. You never know. It could be Diallo time. Let's move over to a player who didn't quite make it at United, but is also about to have a defining season himself, and that is Anthony Elanga. This is a player that is full of confidence right now, and I actually think is seriously worth considering as a 5.5 million option that is a differential. Last season, Elanga had 13 goal involvements, and he's desperate to prove that decision for him to leave United to play regular first-team football was right. Like, he wanted minutes. He wanted to feel like part of something. And he's arrived in that moment. There's been some interviews that he's done in pre-season, and he speaks about the confidence he took from playing so many matches last season, and that it's helped him grow as a man, but also as a player. He's starting to convince me that he wants more responsibility to deliver big moments. I already liked Elanga. I've always been fond of his style of play. He's pacey, he's a difference maker, he's brave on the ball. And I think Forest are actually going to be a much better team this season. And I think that Elanga is worth considering. The first 3 games of the season are Bournemouth, Southampton, Wolves. They actually have a pretty decent pattern of games as well, actually, even after. They have a couple of sticky ones, but then they have a nice little trend of games where you think, do you know what? They can be separated quite easily by moments. And it's Elanga who I think can impact on those games and have a big say. So just keep an eye on Anthony Elanga, because he has the vibe of someone that's really ready to bang. Right, the last couple I'm going to talk about are actually defenders. And the first one is becoming quite a talking point. It's Valentine Barco at Brighton. Now, one of the really good things you could do with Barco is look to rotate him with a promising 5.5 million asset. And there are loads of those out there, right? We've all seen that you can easily pick a defence of 4.5 million defenders going into the season. Barco comes in at 4. He's good enough, and I think he'll be convincing enough to rely on when the 4.5 million guys have tough game weeks. Look, he still has a lot to learn. From a defensive standpoint, he'll probably still make mistakes, but this is a Brighton team that are going to be very easy on the eye, and he will hold a certain threat level as part of that. A lot's being made of the fact that he's on corners. I think probably too much is being made of the fact that he's been taking corners in pre-season. Doesn't count for that much in the overall picture. But the more I have looked into this Barco pre-season, the more sure I become that he should be a top asset at this price point. And I actually think he'll be one of the most selected players by the time we get to the start of the season. His deliveries are really good. He is on set pieces a lot of the time. We can't ignore that. He seems to be developing a good understanding of how the team plays as well. If you remember his costly errors from last season, then fine. But I would just advise that you wipe that from your memory. It's going to happen. He's young. He's learning from mistakes at the highest level. I can't say it won't happen again. But I do think that he can be trusted to develop, learn fast, have some big moments. And at 4 million, I feel like Barco is going to be a must-have, especially in the early weeks of the season, if Estupiñán is out as we think he's going to be. The final player I'm going to look at is Tino Livramento, who should be on everybody's radar right now at Newcastle. I think it's easy to forget how good this player actually is. Newcastle signed him last August as a player that would have a big impact in the future. I think there's a good chance that time is now. There are serious doubts about Kieran Trippier being a Newcastle player next season. And in pre-season, Livramento he started the last game, and I think that this is something we should start to get used to. Newcastle have a good first 5 game weeks, And as it stands, I expect Livramento to get a good amount of action from those games. He's only 21, but he's got a good future ahead of him. And this is kind of what they had in mind. Like, he was always going to come in, establish himself in the environment, and then be given the chance to thrive. And at right back for Newcastle next season, with Trippier likely to leave, I'm willing to trust him. I don't think there's much to fear here, because as a pick, yeah, Newcastle, I think, generally are a side to target in the early part of the season. If Eddie Howe does end up leaving, if England do make an approach for him, then possibly we have to alter how we look at this. But for now, Howe is there. He knows Livramento really well, and he clearly trusts him. I think Livramento could be one of the best 4.5 million defenders in this game, especially in the early weeks. This has been Chasing Green Arrows. Make sure you are tuning in every Monday and Friday for our live shows as I join Gianni and Big Man to go over all the crunch decisions in the build-up to Game Week 1.